What?
What now?
What?
That's going to open the show.
Welcome to AT Banter, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything regarding the world of assistive technology. With our hosts, Steve Barclay, Rob Minot, and Ryan Fleury. Now, let's banter.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
I am Rob Minot, and joining me today are Ryan Fleury.
Hello.
Mr. Steve Barclay.
Howdy.
And for those who remember,
Special guest star.
from the anniversary show, the Christmas show, and many of his other hits in the background as we recorded the podcast, we have Mr. Rick Chant with us today.
Yay.
Good morning.
So we should tell everybody who Rick Chant is if they're not familiar with him. Ryan, why don't you do the honors?
Rick used to be the service manager for Aroga Technologies, whom we all used to work for. And
Oh,
has
you
now-
new kids.
That's right.
Near 23 years.
And he has now started his own company called Chaos Technical Services.
Which does the same thing, which fixes broke stuff.
That's right.
Which does the same thing for the same people on the same equipment. The only thing different is the company name.
Right.
That's about it.
Pretty much.
And he actually has a smile on his face now when you call him.
Yes, he does.
It's amazing what working from home
Because
can do.
somebody else is not paying the piper to pipe the tune.
That's right.
Well, Ryan,
Rob,
what are we up to today?
today we are having an interview with our very own Steve Barclay.
Yeah, I think this is just a bad idea. Particularly since Rick's in the room. Because that pretty much guarantees it's not going to be an interview. It's going to be a roast.
Well, that's okay.
Well, that's okay too. We can market that. We can work with that.
We thought about plowing through your Facebook friends and getting some guests on, but
That's right. We
you-
couldn't find your grade 3 teacher though.
Are you imitating that I know things?
You know a few things.
just a few.
Because Rick and I go back past Aroga. We go back to Crosshatch Copiers.
30
That's
years.
right. Yeah.
Oh my God!
30 years we've been friends.
Kicking about.
Wow.
And my sister used to board at his house.
Yeah, Karen lived with me for 3 years. I know lots about Steve.
And his father-in-law was my elementary school principal at one point.
I know even more about Steve.
That's right.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of a different episode for us. We wouldn't normally interview ourselves, but we were sitting around and thinking about it, and we all have a lot of experience in this field, and we have some stuff to say. So we thought, why not? Let's turn the mics inward and
See who we can offend.
So, well, tell us, Steve, how many years have you been in the assistive technology field?
He hasn't got that many fingers and toes.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I started in 1990, so it'll be
Oh my God.
27 years come November.
Wow. Okay. And what the hell led you down the assistive technology path?
Fluke, divine intervention.
I feel like that's how most careers start.
Yeah,
A lot of times.
I was working for a photocopier company, and actually I was working with Rick at the photocopier company, and they made me the service manager. And after a while, I discovered that being service manager meant that you got to take all the crap for everything that went wrong, but you weren't actually allowed to change anything. So I eventually got fed up with the role and quit to pursue my brilliant science fiction writing career. After a few weeks and meeting some of the local sci-fi writers, some of whom were really good, most notably Spider Robinson, who I think he'd won both the Hugo and the Nebula, and he was having trouble making his rent. I finally wised up and realized that I probably wasn't going to make much of a career out of sci-fi because, well, Spider was 1,000 times better than I was at writing, and if he couldn't make it, then, well,
Pretty slim chance.
I probably wasn't going to either. So I started looking for work. And back then, color laser copiers were pretty new, and I'd been trained on them by Panasonic. So I started shopping that skill set around, and Kodak was very interested in hiring me. The service manager at Kodak basically said, hang on, I've got to get permission to open up a position for you. But hold on, and I'll get it done. So I was waiting around for that. My roommate at the time, Kelly Whitehouse, I think he just got sick of seeing me sitting around on the couch at home, and he ended up taking my resume in. He worked in a computer company, and there was this little company that was renting 2 rooms out of the back of their offices. And he took my resume into them. And he had told me, he said, listen, there's this company, they're renting 2 rooms out of the back of our office. They're looking for a service technician. And I said, I don't know, a company renting 2 rooms out of the back of your office, that sounds pretty shady. I'm not really interested in that. Besides, I had Kodak on the line. But he took my resume in anyway, and he came home that day, and he says, okay, you've got an interview tomorrow at noon. It's like, well, man, okay, well, fine. So really wasn't into it. So I didn't bother to dress up. I just sort of showed up looking scruffy, hadn't shaved, and met Bob and Barb Vigorette and their fairly new company, Aroga. And Bob and Barb had just finished interviewing a whole bunch of BCIT grads who were showing up in suits and ties, and they were a couple of hippies from Manitoba. And when the scruffy looking nerf herder came through the door, they looked at me and they went, yeah, we could probably live with that scruffy prick. So later that day, Bob offered me the job, and I said, no, I'm really not interested. I've got Kodak on the line. And he ended up selling me on the job over the phone.
He was a good salesman.
He was a good salesman. So I ended up working for him, and the day that I started work, Kodak called and said, hey, we've got that position opened up for you.
Oh, no.
And the rest, as they say, is history. Been at it ever since.
So explain to me, they were only renting 2 rooms at the time?
Yeah, they had one room that was
a warehouse.
Bob and Barb's office, and no, I don't think you ever saw this place. It was
I didn't. Never did.
It was they had one room that was showroom and Bob and Barb's office. They had a couple of desks in there, and then the other room was just kind of a storeroom, and that ended up becoming my my workshop for the first while. The computer company that they were renting the space from was a company called Structured Computer Systems. And I'm not sure how long we were actually in that office, but at one point that company was going out of business, and they ran into some financial trouble. And one day, just as I'm about to leave work, bailiffs showed up at the door and started grabbing stuff. And I ended up having to stay behind to keep beating the bailiffs off to keep them from grabbing stuff out of our offices, because legally they were entitled to take anything that was
on the premises.
On the premises.
Yeesh.
So yeah, we ended up moving out of there when that happened, and got into a place in North Vancouver on Bewick Avenue in North Van.
So you were literally employee number 1.
I was, yeah.
And what was it that you're working as the service manager at that point? So you were just fixing?
Yeah, I was fixing things. Back then it was, Versa Brailles, Navigator Braille displays, Opticons.
Liberators.
No, Liberators came later. I was doing touch talkers and light talkers.
Oh. Intro talkers.
Intro talkers, yeah. I can't remember the Prentke-Romich product. It was a big wheel that had symbols on it. Can't remember what the name of that thing was. We had a couple of those that came in time to time. And then just odds and sods, switches and, anything that
Broke stuff.
Yeah, anything that was broke stuff.
So
Yeah.
were they running as mainly a communication aid company at that point, or had they expanded to the entire product groups that they eventually would carry?
Yeah, at the time, the two big lines for them were Prentke-Romich Company for communication aids and telesensory systems for low vision and blindness products. Telesensory had just taken over VTech, which was another manufacturer of low vision aids. So there was a lot of legacy VTech product that was kicking around that had to be repaired, as well as the newer telesensory products.
So they really hadn't delved into, like, say, physical access or education at that point.
Physical access was sort of a component of...
Hanging off the edge of a desk.
Yeah, it was a component of the augmentative communication as much as anything. They didn't have the really sophisticated computer interfaces that we have now. Back then, the state of the art for computer interface for somebody with a physical disability was Morse code on a SIP puff switch, typically.
Wow.
So yeah, it was slow and ponderous. And then we started to get into early voice recognition. We played with a few different voice recognition systems. Back then they
OCR stuff.
Yeah,
Oscar.
OCR, Oscar, yeah. Yeah, Oscar.
What's Oscar?
Oscar was an OCR product from Telesensory. It was a Hewlett-Packard scanner that had an interface card that went into the computer.
SCSI interface card.
Big SCSI interface card. And there was a separate processing card to do OCR that was proprietary to Telesensory. And then you had VERT.
SoftVert, yeah.
SoftVert. No, actually back then it was VERT
Pro.
Yeah, with the hardware card.
SoftVert wouldn't work with the OCR stuff.
Yeah.
So they had to update it. I went to a
SoftVert came out afterwards because initially you had to have the VERT card.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm asked backwards.
And then they made SoftVert, which allowed you to use other speech synthesizers other than the VERT card. So, yeah.
That's a long time ago.
And that's when we learned the phrase, accent ready.
Accent ready.
See, folks, this is what it sounds like when you talk about 80s music in front of your kids.
Yep.
That's exactly that feeling of, I don't know what they're talking about, but they're really excited about it, apparently.
Well, DOS, man. DOS.
Oh, yeah. Still use it.
Yeah.
Still use it.
Oh, sure, yes.
Command line? Sure.
Yep.
Well, okay. So, and what was your take on it at first? Like, did you find it intimidating? What did you think of the field when you first entered it? And did you have any conception that this was going to be a career for you?
It was intimidating because I had done my computer training on mainframe computers, not on PCs. And then I'd spent 3 years fixing photocopiers, which was completely outside of the computer field other than for some of their controller cards. So when I got back into computers for this, everything had changed. Everything was completely different. We were using early generations of IBM
Pentiums?
No.
Oh, God, no.
Pentiums
Pentiums.
came later.
38625s.
No, I started on
8088s.
8088s. Yeah. And then went up from there. So they were finicky to configure. Now I was very fortunate because we were housed in with structured computer systems, and my roommate Kelly was there. He had more experience on that kind of stuff than I did.
You had a brain to pick.
Yeah, he was always around to help me out when I needed it. So he really helped me get off the ground with that stuff in the early going, which I needed in a big bad way. So, yeah, it was intimidating. But did I see it as a career? I don't think I did at first. No. It was just a job.
So what kept you there?
It was the human experience. One of the most powerful experiences I ever had early on was I was sent over to Parksville on Vancouver Island to deliver a large print system to a veteran over there. And this guy, he was, I don't know, he was probably in his 70s or so. You know, he had his war medals up on the wall. There were pictures of him, you know, standing there as a soldier. You know, he'd fought all across Europe in World War II. And I set up a large print system for him and turned it on, put some paper underneath it. He read for the first time in years, and he started to cry. You know, this tough old soldier was just completely rendered emotional because all of a sudden he was once again able to do something that he loved, and that was read. That was I think when I drank the Kool-Aid, you know, because it was the first time that I actually recognized the kind of impact that type of equipment could have on people's lives.
And is that what kind of continues to draw you into the field?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one of the only industries that I know of where you can have that kind of immediate and tangible impact on somebody's quality of life. You know, it really is, you know, maybe it's just that I have a short attention span and, you know, I need the instant gratification, but
Squirrel.
But, yeah. but yeah, it's immediate reward when something works out.
So tell us a little bit about the trajectory that you took at Aroga then, because you went from service manager to a different role. How did that come about?
I think it really, I kind of got pushed into the role of doing sales over service. I think where it happened was probably when Windows started coming in. So Windows 3.1, when it initially came out, was completely inaccessible, and people started hammering on it right away to try and get access solutions. And when we as a company first got into offering solutions for Windows 3.1, we had two products that were available to us. We had JAWS from back then it was Hunter Joyce, and we had Screen Power for Windows that was coming through Telesensory. It was actually a German-made product that Telesensory was relabeling. And Bob and I decided we were going to do a presentation for SETBC, Special Education Technology, British Columbia. And, you know, we were on the fence as to which one of these was better, which one had a better approach. So Bob took JAWS. I took Screen Power. We both learned them, and then we both went to SETBC, and we did our demo on the two screen readers. Well, I kicked Bob's ass. Bob had JAWS. I sold them on Screen Power, and you know, anybody who knows screen readers now knows the history and how long Screen Power lasted. It's gone. JAWS is by far and away the dominant product, and I think right around then Bob realized, hey, this guy can learn this stuff fairly quickly and can show it to people, and you know, and that's next thing I knew I was out doing demos. I mean, he just kept pointing me at places and sending me off to do demos, and that's what I did.
And so is that where Mr. Rick Chant entered the picture as the new service manager?
Just as he was moving over to sales,
Yep.
I was in the process of returning from Saipan, which is 100 miles north of Guam. And we'd been friends prior to my leaving. And he called one day and he said, I got a position for you if you're interested. Okay, well, let's see what it is. What is it, first off? And, tell me more about this. And so we went down that road, and I left Saipan in August with the anticipation of traveling for 4 months, kicking around Europe with my wife and 8-month-old daughter. And I came back and started in January of 94, January 4th of 94. And I've been here ever since.
Now, let me ask you a similar question to Steve then. Were you intimidated by the nature of the equipment, or is it just equipment to you? And
no, my wife lost her vision in one eye, birthing my oldest daughter. So she's blind, and I went through the whole emotional roller coaster of, oh my God, this has been a traumatic experience. My wife is now blind when she wasn't. She was only partially blind in one eye. And I went through that whole emotional roller coaster, and I did some soul searching and asked myself a bunch of questions. Can I manage this relationship? And it was a fairly new relationship at the time. And then, as we were getting back, we traveled quite a bit, and I saw that she was actually managing quite well, considering it had only been a year. And I looked at this job that Steve said that he wanted me to look at, and it was kind of like, yeah, okay, I can do this for a while until I find something else. And 23 years later, I'm still looking to find something else.
so was it a similar experience though, once you got involved in the industry and seeing some of the stories that were coming out of the?
Well, I was doing computers in the background. I was building computers in Saipan for the American military mostly, with an outfit called White Coconut Computers. And we were doing a space-based radar station there. So my exposure from school was electronically was through photocopiers and stuff, and then I went to building computers there. So my computer experience was pretty solid. I'd not written batch files and stuff like that to make various peripherals work, but I mean that was a learning curve. But no, I wasn't intimidated until it came to some of the dedicated adaptive stuff,
right?
The communication aids,
right?
The braille displays, stuff like that. It's kind of like you open a page of schematics and it's hieroglyphics.
Yeah.
And then you got to go back and think about what you learned 2, 3, 4, 5, for me, with the military 10 years prior, and bring all that forward to be successful at what you do. So it was a learning curve. Was I intimidated? I don't know that intimidated is the right word. I think it's more, I approached it with some trepidation because I knew the impact of screwing this up was pretty extensive on the back end for the user.
Right. So is that what kept you in the field though?
Yes.
No, what kept him in the field was every time he said, I quit, I would smack him upside the head and say, no, you don't.
Yeah, I've quit many, many, many times over the course of my career of working with Aroga. Probably a couple of times a year, actually. I never get hired back with a raise, though, is the problem. No, that's not what it was at all. I enjoyed the work, and again, echoing Steve, it's something that I could see benefits to the end user fairly early on.
Right.
And that's what piqued my interest, and that's what kept me there. And, then all of a sudden, Bob and Barb got their heads together and said, well, he's okay at this, but maybe we should get some more formal training. Well, then it was off to, do enhanced vision stuff and brailers and all the other things that we were supposed to be selling. We always had the policy that we did sales and service.
Right.
So then I trained up on all that stuff. So then they were getting their, because I told Bob when I started that I would give him 5 years. And then I would reevaluate. And about year 3 is when he started sending me on all these training sessions. I think he was trying to get his meat hooks into me. And
He wasn't dumb.
no, that's for sure. And ultimately he did. He wound up, making it so that I couldn't leave with a clear conscience
Right.
because of what I would be leaving behind. So I never left.
So it must have been interesting for you guys being basically coming into Aroga at the ground floor when they're, renting out 2 rooms in a computer store to where they eventually went.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we moved. Aroga moved from 2 rooms in the back end of a computer store to Bewick Avenue, which was 2 rooms in a showroom and a small warehouse, and a reception area. And we were there for 4 or 5 years. And then when we were falling over boxes and falling over each other, and we used to have to start hot desking it because Elaine was with us then. So
Yeah, and-
Elaine and Barb would be hot desking it. Barb had worked from Bowen, which is where they lived. Elaine would be in one day, and then they would switch back and forth, and then Bob would be gone, and Steve would be in, and it was kind of they come and go like the tide. And when everybody was there, we were tripping all over each other. So we obviously needed bigger space, and then we moved down to Welch Street, and we moved from 600-ish square feet to 3,200 square feet. And I thought we'd be rattling around for years in that space. And within a year, it was stacked to the rafters.
Right.
We started warehousing stuff and having stuff that we weren't special ordering specifically. We kept stock on hand. And, as soon as the order came in, boom, it was out the door. So that was a really big jump for us. And then after being there for some time, we moved to CNIB on Joyce Street, which, if you ask me, was the smartest move that Bob ever made.
Yep.
As much as I hated it from the commute perspective, we shared a bunch of common clients. So when they went to CNIB for assessments or for, they'd stop by.
Right.
And I think that was a brilliant, brilliant move on his part.
Yeah, it was. It was a great space.
Yep.
And then from there to Henning, we were at CNIB for 10 years. And then there to Henning, we were at Henning for 3 years. And that move was precipitated because they had sold the building, and the people who bought it were downsizing and moving clients around in the building. And they really wanted the space is what they really wanted. And now it's a Tim Hortons.
Yeah.
Certainly a long-term lessee in the space.
Well, and BC Blind Sports is in our old warehouse space now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we moved down to Henning, and we were there for 3 years. And then to Winston, and we were there a year. Or not quite a year.
Was it not quite
Year
a year?
and a half.
Yeah, it was more than a year.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were going on to our second.
Oh, I
And-
thought it was going on to our first.
We'll get to that part of the story later.
Yeah.
Well, so that growth from 2 rooms to, probably at its peak would be the CNIB years.
Yeah, that was a big space.
Was that because of the industry growing, or was it more of just an internal business building, or what sort of caused it in your eyes?
Bob was really, really good at managing growth and seeing opportunity and capitalizing opportunity. So we originally had the one office in North Vancouver. Eventually we hired his sister, who was in Kingston, Ontario. She gave us our first Ontario presence. We opened up an office in Edmonton, Alberta with Carrie Anton, and that office grew for a while. We made a shot at Montreal.
Montreal never actually
Right.
amounted to much, though.
No, it didn't. It didn't pan out.
There were a bunch of promises by the suppliers.
And by the
about-
agencies.
About how much volume would go through a presence in Quebec, and it never materialized.
Yeah. But he was never afraid to pull back too if he had to. If something wasn't working out, he would back out. He would reduce the costs, and he was very cautious and excellent manager of the business.
Very conservative.
Yeah.
Very well thought out.
Yeah.
And an excellent planner.
Yes.
Like beyond excellent planner.
Yeah.
These are the milestones that I need to reach, and if we're not doing that, then we need to assess why, and if we can't assess why, we need to get out of there.
Yep.
But did you find that, I mean, being this would have been like early 2000s, was the technology in the industry changing?
Well, you see, you had it from two sides. You had an aging population needing more equipment, and you had somebody who was conservative at growing a company looking at this population and trying to figure out how to leverage one against the other. So it was a combination of two factors being managed in the background by somebody who's obviously a very good manager. And I think that's what caused us to grow to the point that we had when we were at CNIB, 3,500 square feet of retail and office and warehouse and shipping. And, it was a pretty rare occurrence that a business day didn't go by that somebody wasn't dropping something off or picking something up.
Right.
A pretty rare occurrence.
Yeah. But at the same time, there were also more and more companies that were recognizing the needs of this population and were developing new products for that population.
That as well.
And because Aroga was the only company in Canada that had multiple locations across the country, it was the go-to company to go to when you wanted to introduce a new product. If they started looking at, distribution in Canada, they could, if they wanted to, go to 5 or 6 different companies and have regional representation for different places. Or they could go to Aroga and they could
nationally be represented.
Yeah. With a company that already had a lot of good contacts into the areas that they needed to get into. So it was oftentimes a natural pairing, and it allowed Aroga to get a lot of exclusive lines where other distributors didn't have the same opportunity.
And that ultimately is how Aroga became such a household name in that market.
Yeah.
Right? Adaptive equipment and Aroga were hand in hand in this country.
What kind of technological changes did you guys see that caused the assistive technology field to sort of leap forward?
The biggest influence, I think, on assistive technology over the last couple of decades has been the increasing power of computer platforms. We're pretty nonchalant about the little computers that we carry around in our pockets that we refer to as phones. But those things are vastly more capable than any computer out there from 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Try 2 years ago.
Well, yeah, maybe in some cases. But that allowed, I think about things like voice recognition. When we first got into voice recognition, we were playing with Dragon version 1. The very first Dragon. Now, Dragon version 1, you had to have a dedicated processing card that went into the computer just for the voice recognition. It offloaded all of the functions for processing voice.
Wait now, stop.
Yeah.
Take a step back. You had to have a platform that had architecture to support said card.
That's true, yeah. So if you wanted a Dragon system back then, it was what, 10 grand? Something like that?
It was well up there.
Yeah, it was
well up there.
It was expensive because
Yeah.
I think the daughter card was like $4 grand
Yeah.
or something, and then you needed the computer itself, and it was probably $4 or $5 grand. You know,
And then
but-
you needed a good dedicated microphone, and
Yeah.
then you needed,
yeah.
you know,
and
Wow.
you had on the monitor and the various peripherals and stuff and the software, and it was 10 grand.
pricey.
You know, somewhere along the way, they were able to get rid of the daughter card and just do the processing on the computer. And then it just kept getting better and better and better and more accurate. When we started, it was all discrete speech. If you wanted to dictate, you had to put a pause
Between
after.
each word.
Exactly.
Period.
Period. And then, eventually it became natural speech. And once it became natural speech, well, that changed the dynamics, because now you're crossing over into, well, okay, I'm a hunt and peck typist. I don't have a disability, but this can dictate way faster than I can type. So
That line gets blurred.
maybe I'll get voice recognition technology.
Right.
So that opened up the market. And all of a sudden, the company isn't looking at just a specialty disability product anymore. They're looking at a mainstream piece of software. Well, look where it is now.
Right.
Our phones all have voice recognition technology built into them. Now, granted, it's not processed on the phone. It's processed, we actually send that voice recording to a server somewhere where it's processed and returned to us as text. But that happens in the background. We don't see it happening, and it's bloody accurate.
Right.
Far more accurate than any of the systems previously, and it doesn't require any training at all, which you used to have to do with voice recognition. So I guess where I'm heading with this is the progression has been not just that the technology for disabilities has gotten better, but it's become so prevalent that the mainstream market is using it now. Speech output technologies is built into things like cars and so forth to, provide hands-free feedback to drivers while they're driving. Voice recognition, even GPS. GPS was really a product that was a novelty for people who were blind and visually impaired for a long time before it ever became popular in things like TomToms and Garmins and so forth for the mainstream.
Well, I think too, the mainstream, technology, we had a couple of visionaries. We had the Bill Gates for Windows, and we had Steve Jobs for the Mac, right?
Mm-hmm.
And without Windows 95, 98, or, VoiceOver on the Mac, those PCs weren't accessible to anybody with a disability. Steve Jobs from day one had this vision. Same with Bill Gates. And they've just gotten better and better and better.
So do you think that's a natural step towards the idea of universal design? Are we heading in that direction, do you think?
I think we are. I'd take a little bit of issue with Ryan's assertion that Jobs had that vision of accessibility at the beginning. I don't think he did.
Didn't take long to get VoiceOver on the second iPhone that came out.
No, but Apple's Apples were completely inaccessible too, right
Yes.
at the beginning. The only reason they became accessible is because of Berkeley Systems, who developed the screen reader for the Mac, which eventually got bought by Apple.
Right, but even before
and
that,
they started to integrate it.
the Apple IIs and IIes, there were some accessibility built into those.
No, there wasn't. That was all add-ons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, everything for the Apples was an add-on.
Okay.
Yeah, you had to add third-party software
Right.
to it.
Okay.
Yeah, they didn't start to get accessible until the iMac, I think.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's where it was.
What about touchscreens?
Touchscreens. Touchscreens used to be a total pain. There were two ways you could get a touchscreen. You could either get one that was built in to the monitor, which were hugely expensive. Or you could get add-on touch screens, which you've basically Velcroed to the front of the monitor. But in both cases, they had to be calibrated. You had to do these little calibration procedures to make sure that the touch screen was reacting properly. And in the case of the Velcroed ones, they would slip and slide and move about, and they were total pain. Plus, you had to get exactly the right size touchscreen for the size of monitor you had as well. So if you were not 100% correct on your screen size, you would order one, it'd be the wrong size, you'd send it back, you'd get the next one, you'd try that. And we had a lot of touchscreens come and go because people didn't measure their monitors properly or weren't sure what size they needed. And, now touchscreens are in all kinds of things, and they're rock solid. There's no calibration required. They just work. From phones to, tablets to laptop computers, touchscreens are everywhere now.
Now, what about like the advent of the smartphone and iPads and tablets in general, tablet computing? How did that change the industry?
Well, it changed everything. Just the fact that you could have a portable device that, you got to look at it from different groups, because it affected different groups differently. So if you look at it from the low vision and blind perspective, all of a sudden you've got the iPhone out that's got zooming and speech output built into it. Suddenly there's a touchscreen phone with all of this capability, email, web browsing, all of this stuff that you can do through this one mobile platform, and you're not limited because of your visual impairment. You can participate in that without having to go out and buy a whole bunch of specialized aids to get you involved in it. It was a total game changer for the low vision and blindness side of things. If you look at it in terms of physical disabilities, that side, it might have actually, in some cases, been a bit of a hindrance, because all of a sudden you're doing away with physical buttons, which in some cases for some people might be easier to handle than a touch screen, which is, sensitive and, easy to make a mistake on.
Right.
So, there's positives and negatives with different technologies, but now that you're starting to see better interface technologies for physical aspects come out, things like the, I'm thinking of things like the Glass House, where you basically wear a little headset and it drives a cursor around on your mobile device. You could be a quadriplegic with nothing more than head movement, and you could just move your head to control your device. There's plus the fact that there's voice recognition technology built in. That's hugely important.
Right.
There's Bluetooth switch interfaces now that you can get to help with stuff. There's switch interface protocols that are built into these devices now too. So that side it might have been a little bit slower to kind of revolutionize the lives of people with physical disabilities, but it's got there.
Right. Well, and even now they're developing, we talked to Hap2U a few months back, who are working on developing or integrating haptics into touchscreens.
Oh, yeah.
So, you could see touchscreens really be able to become usable by, say, the visually impaired.
Yeah, I've heard, and I wasn't around for that one, and I haven't actually listened to that podcast, but I've heard of haptic touchscreens in the past, talked about. There was some speculation that it was going to be on the iPhone 5 at one point. Never came to pass. But, could you, using haptics, do a reasonable representation of Braille?
I don't think they were necessarily talking about Braille on their podcast we did. They were more talking about being able to feel like knobs or volume sliders.
Buttons
that were on the screen.
Yeah, at least initially. It could be down the road at some point. But Braille would be very finicky and you'd have to have really fine haptics, and I don't think the technology is quite there yet to be able to emulate Braille on on a touch screen. So, but boy, once they can, that'll be a hot seller.
Oh, are you kidding? If you could suddenly turn every touchscreen device into a Braille device,
Yeah.
yeah, that'd be massive.
Okay, well, let's dive into the fun stuff then. So that went on for many years. As we talked about, Aroga went through many changes. We changed offices. But at some point, you found you had the keys, well, part of the keys to the kingdom. Tell us about how that happened.
I had part of the keys to the kingdom. Yeah. That was probably the single biggest mistake of my life. If I was to give one piece of business advice to anybody out there, it is never buy in as a minority partner. Never. It was just a terribly, terribly bad idea. I would never do it again. You don't have control. You're essentially a third wheel with your fate in somebody else's hands, and that was where I found myself. My fate was in somebody else's hands, and as it turns out, it didn't work out so well. Yeah, so I had a 40% ownership stake in Aroga. My partner had a 60% ownership stake, and because he had a background in the corporate world and finance.
Oh, sorry.
I agreed to have him take over all accounting aspects and all financial aspects of the company, and that really didn't pan out.
To say the least, it didn't pan out.
Do I need to say more?
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think I need to say more. I mean, all of the potential of Aroga, all of the success that Aroga had vanished in 2 years. It was gone, and it wasn't massive change in the marketplace that did it. It was
Mismanagement at the top.
It was other aspects.
Which is the polite way of saying. Yeah, well, certainly, I mean, if anything, the industry was and is still growing.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
Yep.
some parts of it for sure.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and there's still innovation going on. There's still new products coming down the pipe. There's a lot of exciting work that's happening. And for our listeners' sake, I would just like to stress at this point, buy my stuff.
And call me if stuff is broke.
Sorry, was that a little desperate there, guys?
Well, on that note, then, so what did you do? So Aroga sort of slid into into the pit.
Initially chaos, and then it slid further to the point where the bank called our loan and demanded repayment, which we weren't able to do, which forced us into receivership. And they basically came in, closed the doors, and liquidated the assets.
Now that had to have been incredibly frustrating to deal to just have your hands tied like that and just watch a company that you've been invested in, for that long, to just sort of slide into receivership that fast.
Well, I wouldn't say it was all that fast. We'd been struggling for over a year financially, and I was given all sorts of reasons for why we were struggling financially, but now I'm in significant doubt as to whether any of those reasons that I was given were actually the case. TD has filed fraud charges, which I'm now fortunately clear of, but they're still very interested in pursuing those against the other owner, who has subsequently, it seems, moved to Australia. So there may still be a reckoning to come from this.
I hope so.
We'll see. We'll see what comes in the future.
So see, you're so very nonchalant about it, and that when this was happening, that fired us up so bad around the kitchen table some nights. But if you look in this room right now, there are 4 people sitting here, and between us, we've got 80 years in this industry.
Right.
Steve's at 27. I'm at 23. That's 50. And between you guys,
We're into the
14 and
30.
16 or
Yep.
13 and 17 or whatever it is, that's 80 years. And to have that flushed away in 18 months, 2 years, yeah, that galls me just a little bit.
Well, and it must have hurt too, in the sense of, all the relationships that the company had built and all the clients and all the people who were relying on Aroga to help them with their servicing needs or with some of their tech support or whatever it was. I mean, it must have, it's frustrating to think that you've left a hole in those people's lives as well. It's,
The thing that,
for sure.
The thing that bothered me about it was when this all started to happen, I can see making some of the clients angry in the short term if it's going to help long term. But when you screw the suppliers over, then you not only lose the suppliers on the backside, you lose the clients on the front side. So then you're left rebuilding all these relationships all over again.
right.
And we're seeing a lot of that stuff come back to roost. PRC has gone internal. They're not doing any service. And I was doing the service in Canada for them. They're pulling all that back to Ohio now. And
Plus, they went direct on the sales. They're no longer going through a company for representation. They're doing that directly.
so, all the augmentative communication clients across the country now have to send stuff back to the U.S. And I think that's a huge disservice.
Well, sure, because there's brokerage and fees.
Well, they're picking all that up,
okay.
from what I understand. But, I mean, it's a royal pain. We've got clients here in town that have to send stuff to Ohio when I'm perfectly capable of servicing it. And I think if we had been, retrospectively, more forthcoming to our suppliers in admitting that we were having issues, that it might not have come to this.
No, they were aware that we were having issues.
Oh, yeah, they
were
certainly.
Painfully aware that we were having issues.
Yes.
The problem was that they kept on getting told things were going to happen.
That
on
didn't
certain
happen.
Timelines that didn't happen.
Right.
And eventually they just stopped believing anything
Right.
they were going to hear, and who can blame them?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is up front,
Yeah.
I think it was poorly handled.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what led us to this place.
Yeah. No, you're right. That's a fair comment.
So, were you able to salvage some of those relationships, Steve?
I was able to salvage virtually all of all of my relationships on the low vision and blindness side of things. People were willing to take me on again, but in more than one instance, I was severely questioned as to whether my old business partner had anything to do with my new company, and they were not willing to have anything to do with me if he was still part of it. He burned a lot of bridges.
He pissed a lot of people off.
Oh yeah,
Including us.
yeah,
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate in that, a lot of these guys, I've known them for a very, very long time. They know enough about me. They're comfortable enough with me that they're still willing to do business with me. But boy, did it put a bad taste in their mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, yeah, I got a lot of crow to eat for the next bunch of years.
But it must have been. I can't imagine how frustrating it must have felt, because you want to tell these people something, and either you don't even have the good information to pass on to them, or you're not getting the information that they need.
Well, like he said, we were getting fed misinformation, so we didn't know what to tell people.
Right.
They'd call and say, "Where's my stuff?" I was like, I don't know. let me see if I can find out for you.
When I'm told that a supplier is going to be paid on such and such a date and they're going to get such and such amount of money, and I go and I tell that to the supplier,
and then it doesn't materialize.
And then that date comes and goes, and they don't get paid on that date, and maybe they get paid a few days later, but it's like half of what they've been promised. That can only happen so many times before
credibility is shot.
Yeah, you've got zero credibility, and fortunately they knew that I wasn't in charge of the purse strings. I was just passing on what I'd been told, but after a while I didn't even want to pick up the phone, because they couldn't get my partner. They couldn't get him on the phone, so they would end up calling me because they knew me, and I wouldn't be able to tell him anything without talking to him, and then after I talked to him, I might not be able to deliver on what I'd been told to tell him was happening. So it was awful. It was just
very frustrating.
Professionally, it was the worst 2 years of my life.
Well, sure,
hands down.
Well, sure, and I know me and Ryan can attest to the same thing. I mean, we were front row center for all of that, and we had to deal with some of that too. I mean, Ryan a little bit more than I did, but clients calling and you literally you don't know what to tell them, and it's the real thing that breaks your heart is that these are also people that need this stuff. And they need the equipment.
Yeah,
and. Yeah, it was an incredibly frustrating experience, I think, for everybody, for sure.
I think back to the start of last school year, and all of these people who are waiting for equipment to start the school year with.
Right.
And we couldn't deliver it in a timely fashion. And you don't want to lose the order. You want that order, and you want to be able to deliver the stuff, but you can't tell them when it's coming. Mm-hmm. It was just, it was a fiasco. It was awful.
Yep.
But there's a new chapter.
That's right.
There is a new chapter.
So let's talk the new chapter. So
yeah, let's talk the new chapter.
What happened? So Aroga went down. What did you do? What was your reaction?
Well, it's kind of funny because initially when I found out that Bob was selling the company to the guy who ultimately became my business partner, I created a fallback position because I wasn't happy about that. So I incorporated a company, Canadian Assistive Technologies, in 2014. And I actually quit. I quit at Aroga. I put my resignation letter on Bob's desk, told him I knew what was going on, and I was heading off to do my own thing. By the end of that day, Grove and I had hammered out a partnership agreement, and we proceeded with taking over Aroga jointly. I should have stayed with Canadian Assistive Technology.
You should have, I know. And we all should have left to go join your company.
Well, you know what? It would have been really hard for those couple of years because Aroga had those lines nailed down. So what product lines would I have been able to get? I might have been able to get some, but it would have been tough going. I probably wouldn't have been able to pick up a lot of stuff until the wheels started to come off Aroga, a couple of years down the road, and I didn't even know that was going to happen back then. So, hindsight is 20/20.
Right.
But anyways, when the wheels did come off Aroga, Canadian Assistive Technologies was sitting there on the back bench, ready to be revived and picked up. So I started getting in touch with suppliers and telling them what had happened, and a lot of them came on board immediately. A lot of them came later, but now I've got an established presence. It's not a big company. It's not an Aroga. I'm starting small, but it's going to grow, and I want to follow through on those same values that we had at Aroga of service and support. Being our main differentiator between us and everybody else.
I mean, it seems to me that even that whole experience sounds so terrible that I don't think anyone would have blamed you to just walk away from the industry completely. Like what kept you in the field even after that type of experience?
I've been doing this for 27 years. I don't have any other marketable skills. What the heck else am I going to do?
I was looking for a more noble answer, but that's the honest part of the podcast.
That's reality, right?
Yeah. But
I mean,
well, listen, hey.
Really, honestly, my other option, I did have another option. My other option was to take a trades job.
Right.
You know, I could have, I've got a buddy who runs a restoration company. I could have gone to work for him.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, I'm pushing 50.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, and we're all in this, you know, in a similar boat. But I find that, you know, after being in this industry for 15 years, it would bum me out to go work for a different company that had different priorities and different values and a different customer base.
I've said the same thing to my wife in looking for work. You know, this assistive technology field is all I know. And, you know, having the relationships that we all developed over the 15, 16, 17 years at Aroga, you know, those meant something, and they still do.
Absolutely.
You know, and I still want to be able to do that.
And, you know, and for people who maybe are either new to the podcast or you haven't been listening that long, but I mean, we're still sitting here doing this podcast because we're all passionate about the field and about the community and people who used to be clients who are now friends.
Yeah.
We're sitting here doing it, you know, in Ryan's basement because we love the industry. And we have a passion for it. And, you know, I know for myself, the idea of going to work for some company that, you know, whatever.
Punch in, punch out, you know.
Well, even that, but even they're just selling products for a profit. And there's no, like, I used to be so proud to tell people where I worked.
Mm-hmm.
You know, incredibly proud. And I think that comes from just the idea that you're dealing with equipment and software that really makes an impact on people's lives.
Yeah. And doing it in an honorable way.
Right. Well, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about Chaos Technical Services.
Okay.
Well, Chaos Technical Services is run by this a-hole that I know. He's just a jerk. And yeah.
Yes, he is.
Crotchety.
Yes, he is.
Do you? By the way, do you still hang up the phone by throwing it across the room?
No, I haven't done that for a long time. It's what I say after I hang up the phone.
Well, okay, so let's frame this properly. But so Aroga always had a service department that serviced any sort of equipment that
Or arranged for it to be serviced. Yes.
right. Anything that was under warranty or even stuff that wasn't under warranty. Anytime anyone had a problem with their device, if they bought it from Aroga,
And sometimes stuff that wasn't bought from Aroga.
Right, sure.
It wouldn't be the first time that Steve or I have worked on an Optelec. Can you come out and visit me? My CCTV is not working. You get there and it's a Smart View, or it's an Optelec, or it's a something completely, you know, sorry, we do EVS and we do telesensory.
Now, that was also something that differentiated Aroga as well, because it was really a complete solution for people. They only had to worry about dealing with one company in terms of all their needs, from sales to support to service. Nobody else really did that, correct?
I think Frontier did. Frontier had a service department.
Did they?
I believe they still do. I don't know.
It's more than I know.
Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, you know, but I don't think there's a lot of other companies that do. And
part of the problem is that it's such specialized equipment that, you know, you can't just take it into any sort of
I would have a real hard time going back to mainstream electronics.
Well, and I don't think that any sort of mainstream electronics service center would be able to take a look at a.
Oh no.
Say
No.
any sort of communication aid. Certainly,
No.
I mean,
No, that stuff's way too specialized. I mean, Rick, when he does repair, oftentimes he's doing component level repair. These days, that's unheard of in mainstream electronics. You just don't do that.
You just swap a board. It's easier. It's faster.
right.
Whole lot more expensive. $8 component versus an $800 board, but
Time is money, though.
time is money.
So, when Aroga slid into obscurity, what was your reaction then, Rick?
Well, again, I was pretty bent out of shape. I was having to tell clients the same thing as the sales team was. Yeah, I don't know when you're going to get your equipment. I haven't got any parts. I can't get any parts. Your machine is apart on my workbench. I was expecting parts weeks ago to get this done and get it, and so you put it back in the box and put it on the shelf.
I was told that supplier would get paid 2 weeks ago so that parts would be released, and that didn't happen.
So, then people started questioning my credibility, and my reputation is actually all that I have to go on. This is who I am.
Certainly not good looks and charm.
No, that's for sure. And generally, if I say that something is going to be ready, then 95% of the time it was ready. Whether that had to involve staying late or coming in early or whatever, if it was promised, then it was delivered. So I was quite bent out of shape. And when Aroga actually dwindled into nothingness and I spent a couple of days kicking around home, trying to figure out what I was going to do next, my wife sat me down and she said, okay, you've had 2 days of moaning and wandering around the house and bitching and everything else. You either need to sit down and find a job, or you need to open your own shop. One or the other. Just stop moping around, whatever. So then she planted that little seed and watched it percolate for a couple of weeks, and then she sat me down again and she said, we've got some seed money. If that's what's stopping you from doing this, then don't let it stop you. And we were empty nesters at the time. Both my daughters were, one was in Fiji and one lives in Victoria. So we had space in the house, and it kind of evolved from that. And so far we've had some weeks that are busier than others. It's coming though. It's coming. There's my key accounts are, for the most part, on board. It hurts me to think that, all the time that I've put into some of my suppliers, that's going to get hauled back now because it's going to be serviced at their facility. But you know what? You've got to be able to be flexible, and evolve with conditions. And that's where we're at the moment.
But it must feel really good to be the captain of your own ship and to be able to control the intake of parts and to be able to have quick turnarounds.
Yeah,
for people.
that part of it is great. The thing that I really like about working from home in my own shop is not having to commute.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right? That's an hour and a half a day, 45 minutes each way. And if for no other reason, that has been well worth the energy put into getting this off the ground. But yeah, you're right. Having a dedicated credit card where I can say, I need to order EVS parts. They're going on this card. They get paid for up front, and as soon as the parts are in my hand, I know I can install them and not have any flashback from it. Yes, I can make promises. Yes, based on good information, I'm now able to give you results again. So it's been good. It's been good. I'm not sure I could go back to working at a workbench and have somebody else call the shots again.
Sure.
But I'm enjoying what I'm doing now.
It's a really important job that you're doing, because there's not many people in Canada that has the scope of knowledge that you do when it comes to servicing specialized assistive technology. And I'm not trying to blow smoke up your butt, but but I will. No, but seriously, like because when you're a senior and your CCTV breaks or is flaking out, they don't have anybody to call. Like, they don't.
The 2 phone calls that I took this morning one is the daughter of a 94-year-old woman who has a Merlin that she's had for 6 or 7 years. It works for the first 10 or 15 minutes and then it shuts down. Mom is 94. She's trying to get her affairs in order. She has a heart condition. She has high blood pressure. She could pop off any minute. And that's her biggest concern right now, is getting her affairs in order. And when I told her that she might have to send me her machine for me to do some troubleshooting and possibly replace a camera or a video processing board, she unraveled. That's what I was doing up on the steps, was trying to calm her down and tell her that it was only going to be 10 days, 2 weeks on the outside before she'd have it back on her desk working properly. So that's how much it means to the end user to be without this equipment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and you get these calls from parents. Well, my son is home from school because his communication aid is broke. Kids walked by the desk and turned around, and the backpack knocked it on the floor, and touchscreen is smashed. So they're home for a week or 10 days or 2 weeks until that gets fixed. So taking this technology away from the end users has a dreadful effect on them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, these are the types of stories that, again, for me personally, that it's what kept me at Aroga for all these years too, is that you see these, you see the effect that
the human side of it.
Exactly. The human side of it. You're not just dealing with, you're not just selling product. You're not just, pushing product on people. It's really, and what always impressed me at Aroga was that the adage was, we're going to sell you what's right for you.
Yep.
We're not going to just sell you whatever we can. It's going to be the solution that works best for you for what you want to spend. And then even once that's happened, you're still part of that Aroga family, because, if something goes wrong with it,
it's just a matter of picking up the phone.
And we would always be there for anybody and go out either way. Like, I've watched Rick tear apart, old devices to hobble together a solution because somebody needed their device.
And they couldn't afford a new device, or they couldn't afford huge amounts of money to fix these devices. Yeah, I've been known to steal parts off our new machines sometimes to get somebody up and running. So I think that's some of the things that really frosted me about Aroga's demise, was, how many bridges they burned in the background and in the foreground.
Right. That we had no control over.
We had no control over.
Yeah. Don't be a remote office. No, never be.
But right down to the last days, I mean, we were still trying to get stuff out the door.
The last days, I mean, not to blow smoke up all of our asses, but we literally were sitting in an office, not getting paid
2 weeks
for weeks.
The last 2 weeks, because,
well, for one, we wanted to support Steve, but also we
had wagers. We wanted to know when the ship was sinking.
I'm not supposed to tell him about that.
Did you have a pool?
By the way, who won that pool?
I did.
Yeah, we owe Rick $20.
Oh.
I better get it to you before my EI runs out.
I literally had to go out and set up shipping through Canadian Assistive Technologies to get the last shipments.
Yeah, so
out
did
the
I.
door for Aroga.
So did I.
Yeah.
You know,
So did I. I stole stuff out of that office that belonged to clients
Just so it didn't get caught
and
up.
spirited it home
Yeah.
so that it didn't get caught up with the bailiff when they showed up.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty bad statement to make,
but I mean,
but it was necessary.
and I've never worked at a job or with people that, you know, I felt that much of a connection with that I would have done that. Like a lot of my other jobs previously, you know, if they were like, oh yeah, the bailiff's coming, I'd be like, okay, cool, I guess I get to go home. Bye.
I'm going to steal this. I'm
Yeah.
going to steal that.
Not mine. I didn't touch it.
Anybody have any closing thoughts? Anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to talk about?
For all those listening, we're still here. As Rachel so eloquently put it, the sausage factory is still intact. She was a very beautiful young mid-20s young woman who worked with us, and
Put up with a lot of crap.
we're that put up with a lot of crap.
Mostly
and
from
we're 4 older middle-aged guys, and she dubbed us the sausage factory. Anyway, we're
Actually,
still here.
I believe Rob dubbed us the sausage
Yeah,
factory.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
We're still around, and we'll do whatever we can do to make sure that you're taken care of. That's about from my perspective, that's about all I can add to it.
Yeah.
So where can people find Chaos Technical Services?
Online at chaostechnicalservices.com. Or you can phone my cell, which lives on my hip 8 days a week. 778-847-6840.
See, we'll make it jingle.
That's right.
It'll help.
Sorry, I had a brain fart. Where the hell that was going?
Have you actually looked at that to see if it spells anything?
No.
No. We should figure that out.
So yeah, we're still gettable.
8740. Oh, no, it's got a 0 in it.
We're still out there. We're way out there, but and we'd love to hear from you. Whether it's just to sit and chat and catch up, or whether you want to place an order.
I think, you know, and I think that at the end of the day, that's kind of the thing that makes me the saddest too, is that just because we've had to sort of maintain radio silence for so long that, you know, it's some of those relationships have
lost contact. Yeah.
lost contact. So, you know, hopefully this will be a chance to reconnect with a lot of the clients out there that we had relationships with. So
Yeah. They're finding us slowly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're in a good spot at the moment.
So Steve, tell us where people can find Canadian Assistive Technology.
People can find us online at www.canasstech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com. You can phone us at toll free at 1-844 795-8324. You can email me directly at steve@canasstech.com. We're also on Facebook. You can find our Facebook group, which is there. We've also got a Twitter feed, which is at @canasstech. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Well, it's been a fun show. It was good to reminisce and good to vent about some of that stuff. And it feels good to kind of put it out there. Don't you think? Was this therapeutic for you, Steve?
No, not really.
No.
Just rehash the whole bitter memory again. Thanks for dredging up such a bitter memory.
No problem. There's tequila on the table. So.
Not this day.
Every day is a good day.
For tequila?
For tequila.
No, I think not.
All right. Well, how to cap this off?
Well, this is AT Banter Podcast. How do people find us, Rob?
Well, oh God, I usually ask that question. I don't know how to answer that. I'm always asking that. Hey, Ryan.
Rob.
Tell Steve where people can find us.
They can find us online at www.atbanter.com.
They can also email us, if they so desire, at atbanterpodcast@gmail.com.
Beautiful.
And then AT Banter is also on the Facebooks and Twitters and the Instagrams and those sorts of thingies.
Yep. And the YouTube.
Oh yeah, the YouTubies too.
Excellent. And we've already told the lovely people where people can find Chaos Technical, but you know what? Do it one more time because we love you.
ChaosTechnicalServices.com.
Any problem with any sort of assistive technology, feel free to reach out to Mr. Rick Chant. He'll be able to set you up. All right. That is going to do it for us. You know what? Thanks, everybody, for listening. This was a little bit of a self-indulgent episode. So thanks for sticking with us through that. Next week, we've got a great show lined up for you. We're not going to tell you what it is because that's just what we do.
But it's way more interesting than us.
It's true. So everybody stay safe out there. And I have been Rob Minot.
I have generally been Steve Barclay.
I'm still Ryan Fleury.
And the last time we checked, I am still Rick Chant.
And we will see everybody next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canasstech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com. Or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840 or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com. Music provided by bensound.com.